They're working. Yeah. Okay. Good. Before the film begins, I just want to talk to you all. Look, this is certain members' request. A very important principle, which is chi go e. Go chi go e. This has a great deal of relevance to everybody's life, particularly to young men who are allowed for us to relax. So, this morning I was talking about the heavy coat of experiences that in this day and age people have to take because of the nature of our society. That generally is to overcome. We really haven't got the things because we feel we haven't got the strength to face the reality of all those experiences and the weight of this. Usually, I think the first thing people do before they start things, sometimes a little, is to try to find something that's going to help them stand up. That's usually what we're going to find in the case of young. First, the trouble then is that the weight proves too much for the wives, the girlfriend also. Girlfriend and wife can't think the weight of their own problem of their own. So in the end, she collapses. Of course, he collapses also. Then the whole business begins over again. Find some other means of totally overcome. Maybe it's not a girlfriend, whatever it is. It's quite common these days. And every three, I think it is, marriages now is ending in divorce. Or we try to find perhaps a new job, some new surroundings. We decide to move to another hospital. All sorts of ways. I've found some way of living out the great those of experiences. Because we can't get rid of the sound of this one and react with the we can't bring out the reality of life as it is at that particular moment. Having this great with reps in all the each one of those is an event. We don't like looking at them. Thinking at them. We want to put them behind us somehow. Forget them. But we can't. So we can't face the reality of now. Therefore, we can't face the reality of the future. If we can't face the reality of this moment, there's no starting point, is there? Therefore, there's no direction in our lives in those two. So as a result of that, though we may have had secret, as it were, dreams and hopes, we lose them. We feel there's no hope of getting anywhere near them, so the best thing is to forget them altogether. That's as best we can. To misery under them. It was really the love of many young people who hadn't got the handsome. As I say, sometimes even with the handsome, we still not interested with the handsome. We had this incredible principle, waiting for us to use it. To, well, so, if you can read it, it's ultimate aim. The ultimate aim of our lives in each of its various the ultimate aim is to achieve in our life, ultimate aim in our working life, ultimate aim in our social life, the ultimate aim in our life of Buddhist activities as well. Number two is you or me, with the wisdom of the Buddhists. And then here is the action you need to take to achieve the ultimate goal. E is the position of focus, which we need to take up, and we need to make. We need to hold the guidance to reach the ultimate goal. Okay? So that is the description, explanation, simple is to be. First, we then have to put it to work. So really, what is lying behind this principle is that our thinking block wisdom. If we think and think and think and think and worry and worry and feel more and more conscious and intense in our lives and all that thinking hopefully closes back something of wisdom, if you like, deep in our life. Stands to reason, doesn't it? Because we're using our thinking minds. We're not opening up our lives in any way so that wisdom can flow. So behind this principle is the fact that you don't want to think, worry, what you're going to do tomorrow and next day. But first we have to think and think a bit, not endlessly absorbed with how to do things. So what Buddhism is saying is, if you would courageously bring out your secret hopes and dreams, plant them in front of the Ganzen, with the power of the Ganzen to infect them. Then those secret hopes and dreams, secret is a silly word to use, but what you really hope for is, I used to call it, sometimes do stuff, like my golden vision. So your golden vision of the future is something quite mystical. It's not necessarily cryptic there. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something quite general. I want, a job in maybe that particular field, and it's got to fulfill me. I got to love doing it. And I got to prove that it becomes an in job. Maybe it's as general as this. I want a really wonderful wife, a good shot, who can be really my mate in life, mate for personality. Certainly want a couple of children. That's my vision, Nice, I want a realm where people can be here wealthy, children can grow up happily. General as or I want to do something interesting. I really must achieve something in my community to make it a better place to live in. Or in the case of Kosanusu, I want my district really to become a chapter during the next day round. I want to be able to hold district meetings in my I really want to make the BCGs the young men's division. I want to tackle these sort of things, right? Those generalized, they cover each area of your life. Those form altogether the accent. Ultimately, what Buddhism is then saying is, who is you practicing Buddhism, wisdom of the Buddhist state being activated in your life every day through your regular practice. The very nature of the power of the power of non-real you will stop this state. Please get how did you keep that living in your life. It's more vision. Because even though I was occupied in all sorts of different day-to-day things, did have, and I have to this very day, golden vision of what I'm going to achieve in the future. I chose the same time. In your case, maybe by the time you're 40, 50. So because of the difficulties and sufferings of life, it's very difficult for some people to look at the future even. But with the bonds and you can, and with the bonds and you should, and with the bonds and you must, if you're really going to fulfill your own life. So at the AGM this week, I'm going to ask everybody to write healthy rating, nominations of what people want to achieve in the year 2001. These will be put into the test punishment. And eventually, 20 years' time, you're going to take back. We did this in 1975. 10 years. In 1985, all the members of 1975 would be taking out their determinations, and the evidence being stated under the test. They won, they told me. After 3 years, everything written on this was completed anyway. People think that stupid appropriate to help people to establish their soul. Because until you establish your soul, your life will have no momentum, no direction, can't advance. So it's an incredibly important thing. Now, then Buddhism goes on to say, if you establish your soul strongly in each area of your life, if you practice regularly, strongly to things which is free, your wisdom will then strengthen. And you don't have to worry. 90% of the people in the world are worrying all the time about going to eat. What should I do tomorrow? Should I have done that today? Should I do it tomorrow? Should I get to know them? Should I, make friends with the manager and become his assistant? All these we spend our time thinking about. But our mind does not understand the future. Our minds have no conception about what tomorrow is going to be like, let alone what, your head's going to be. On the other hand, the Buddhist state knows the future completely. Past, present, and future are one. So, you with the wisdom that comes, the wisdom that comes and knows the future. So it's the wisdom of the Hansen you must be concerned with to activate in your life. Not spending your time thinking. But he which only thinking. So this is an incredible concept, and it really works. This is the marvelous thing about it. So it works because of Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren Buddhism means the 3,000 realms in a moment of existence. In every moment of your life, that life of yours will be confessing in 3,000 incredibly past realms. Whatever is in your ignorance, in your determination, in the center of your life, will be affecting those three. So if your golden vision is living in your ignorance, then that will be expecting of you in 3,000 different ways every 24 hours of every day, in countless worlds that you can't even speak. These are tiny actions. Yet those tiny actions are not a millimeter big. First, you can see consciously, really taking yourself into in all those different ways, to work golden vision. It's really an amazing concept because once you understand it and get used to using it, It gives you freedom. No longer are you bound to that intense worry and obsession with your own. So first on the way, you're going to struggle. Inevitably, you lower through those obstacles and difficulties and efforts you put living in your life. How to keep it to you. Probably the best way to establish your golden vision is through putting it in the first place. You can give personal praise every single time until it becomes part of you. People may make short account about it. People may do then keep that space to place it in the center of your life and keep it. Then every dialogue you take, every action you take, in fact, you don't realize, leading towards the achievement. So for sure, the only way is to tell them, for instance, Steve his incredible advance, 750,000 members, before he died, over just a few years, was because he established this position. Therefore, everything in his life led towards it. He knows or not. Same with Sensei. Same with each one of us. We can all do it. The reason we find it difficult is we limit things until we imagination. This can be done. It will be done if you really follow that principle. So first, the struggle is to make the strength. If we're going to get value out of the golden vision, when we get, we've got to be strong deeper. If we're weak, we can work every beautiful one. Believe me, we've got to become strong. If we get the business and the red we want, less with it in a thing, anything. So we waste the benefit. So the problem of the time to come. In the best of you know, is that famous line, heated in the flames, and it. The sons of flames, old man and strength, use. But just like making of a sword, coming steel blades, we have to remember. Well, like why that kind of chaos. That's what makes the stress. Purpose of these difficulties. So certainly, young men, we should determine to fight our way through all these difficulties, keeping the golden vision of ourselves only in the sense of really trying never to waver. Then each one of us in our lives will really shine. Let's see it. That's fair. And of course, we can use all those words. Do some. So this principle is incredibly our teacher give physical experience using this principle was
Thank you. The first time I met this principle of Kochi was on a winter course in the south of France, Trets. It was 1977, January the 2nd, 1977. And this course had been a particularly difficult one for me, mainly because from the day we arrived, which was 5 days before, as soon as the boot stand was open, I fell asleep. And this happened every single time. I mean, it didn't matter if I was really full of energy. As soon as the boot stand was open, fell asleep. And obviously, I was getting rather upset about it by the fifth day. And I was really beginning to feel very tired because I was getting no life force, because I wasn't revitalizing my life force. And I was becoming very desperate. And on the 2nd of January, during the day, all the UK members went on an excursion, and I stayed behind to do KB, feeling exceedingly wretched and very negative. Then all of a sudden at lunchtime, a coach full of Belgian members arrived, and they'd driven 16 hours just to come down to the Tret Centre to do New Year's Gongyo and to chant for 2 hours, and then to drive all the way back again. And I was so moved by their spirit that I made a fresh determination, and I chanted the 2 hours with them. And at first I started to go to sleep again, but I fought through it this time, and I began to see what was going on. During the past week, I'd felt that the Gohonzon was trying to tell me something. And I began to realize, I mean, now hearing what Dick says about this great heavy coat you wear, that I couldn't face my own life. But what I began to realize is that I'd been doing very little for the last 3 years as regards my work. And in 1975, I'd been given a pen by President Ikeda on Tozan. And this, in a way, made me think, well, I ought to do some study for the future. And this fell into line with my own feelings of leaving school at just over 15, a year before doing O levels. I left because everybody told me that there was no point in staying on because I wouldn't get the O levels anyway. But I always believed I could get some form of education for myself. So, having received this pen from Sensei, I'd sort of made a determination to study. And I'd tried 3 years in a row, and I'd given up 3 years in a row. And even I got as far as going to take two O levels, and I'd actually set the day for the exams. I'd got the day off from work, and I rolled up on the Thursday, and the exams took place on the Tuesday. So I blew it that time as well. So after chanting these 2 hours with the Belgian members, the UK members came back, and funnily enough, I was having guidance with Dick that evening at 5 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock, and at 12 o'clock we were still talking. It turned out to be about 5 hours of guidance in all. And we discussed a lot about work. I'd had 28 jobs up to that time, so I wasn't very enthusiastic at the possibility of ever finding a a work objective. And he told me of this principle of Kyochi Goi. And he said, as he's explained, that you have to establish your objective very strongly in your life. Well, I thought, well, that's all well and good, but what if you don't know what your objective is? So he said, well, you must chant for your work, You must chant for your work objective. You definitely have one, and you can bring it out through your practice. And I didn't believe him. I remember all the time he was saying, I thought, oh no, I've tried 28 different things. It's not possible. So anyway, I thought I'd give it a try, and I started chanting for my work which is a very difficult thing to chant for. It's so sort of nebulous. You're basing it thinking with my mind again, I was thinking, well, yeah, I've got a work in there somewhere, and if I chant about it, then I should be able to discover it. So it was all very nebulous. It wasn't like chanting for something definite. And as soon as I started chanting, I got these thoughts coming up about working with the sea, because before coming to London, I'd worked as a diver in the Caribbean, and I had this sort of great love for the sea, and I'd worked quite a lot with it in the past. But I just pushed those thoughts out of my head. I thought, well, I want to stay in London, and there's no sea in London, so it's not possible for me to work in the sea in London. So I just cut them off. I continued to chant about my work and gradually I started to lose my determination. And I was working in swimming pools, sort of small sea, really, isn't it? And I, decided, I decided I'd carry on working in swimming pools and maybe become a supervisor and maybe become a manager, and that would be fine, As long as I could do activities, I was happy. Then in October of that year, we had a young men's meeting in the Mendip Hills near Bristol. And during that weekend, the the problems of establishing kios came up again, and I realised that I hadn't done very much in that line. So I made a fresh determination to find my work kyo. And I went back to London. I started chanting about my work kyo, and again, all these desires came up to work with the sea. But this time, I didn't push them away. I let them grow and develop. And at the same time, in the house I was living was an old friend who was trying to get into university to do medicine. And he was writing off all sorts of university prospectuses. And he got one for University College North Wales, Bangor, which is a very, very famous university for marine biology. And he read the course out to me. And of course, I thought that sounds really nice. But he said, well, why don't you try and do that? Something like that. I said, well, you must be mad. I've got no O levels, no A levels. How do you expect me to get to university? And he said, anyway, you can try. Ring them up and ask. And at that moment, there was like this little spark lit up inside my life. And I chanted that night about it, and this spark grew into a flame. And even then, I knew that this was the right direction I was taking. So the next day, we rang them up, and they said, "Well, yeah, we like to have one or two mature students on the course." And actually, you're very lucky, he said, because at Bangor, we run a system of a 4 year course. We have 1 year, which is specially called an intermediate year. And usually we use this for people who are short of one A level. But actually, we cover three A levels. So you could come here and you could do the equivalent of three A levels. And if you can get through that, well, then you can go straight on to the main course, the main degree. So I wrote off my application form, very enthusiastic, and started to chant to get into university. And then I hit this enormous brick wall, which I've now realized was my ego. I suddenly thought, what on earth are you doing? You don't want to leave London and all your friends. You don't want to leave this lovely flat that you struggled so hard to get. You don't want to leave your position of chief of the young men's division. You don't want to leave all that respect that you've gathered over the years. This was all ego. Well, I didn't understand the realities then. So it was like all ego. But I couldn't see it as that. And eventually I decided, well, this is too much for me to challenge. I'll just have to chant for the best thing to happen, like real weak attitude and accept what's best. And this carried on through November and into December. And I suddenly realized if I carried on with this attitude, I'd never get the right answer, that I had to determine to go and then I would find out whether it was right or not. So I did this and within 3 days, I got a letter from them saying, come up for an interview on the 13th of January. And I went up for three interviews. And on the same day, they gave me the place. And on the 10th of July this year, I graduated as a marine biologist. And what is really incredible, which I completely forgot about until just recently, is that when I was 16, I was in the Torquay Sub Aqua Club just learning to dive. And there were two guys there who just passed their A levels, and they were saying, well, we're going off to Bangor to do marine biology. And I thought, if there's one thing I want in the world, is to do that. And without knowing it, I did it. So definitely, now I'm going to establish my soon I'll be starting my own business as a marine biologist in London. So definitely you can find your work, Kyo, through this principle. Thank you very much.
So I hope that that's clear in Peter's experience. He was talking about the rent, as he called it. Also, there's family cares, you know, social service, and as you it's a movement. Each one can be a part of your life at the same time. And it's not a matter of hungering and yearning, especially in the course of your family. Just establishing it only in your age, that's where you want to get to. Then step by step, you get there to get with your ordinary daily truth. So it's really an incredible principle. This is you're doing the things and as it's supposed to be you do. Thank you for film now, as you know, full-time youth division. Repeat. Better this incredible so rose out of the play the youth division in the council in Japan. So peace. This is where was the incredible it involved 100,000 members. That included 10,000 new members. Just in one word. It is amazing. These understand that it was achieved because of the power of the Amazon working in every one of those people's lives. For them to achieve that golden thing, which in this case was putting on a family. There's no one doing the So we've really got some interesting questions. Thank you very much. And I hope you all enjoy this session as a result. So John's going to read the questions out, and then I'll take on the answers.
Right. Question 1 from Robin Chalice. What did Nichiren Daishonin actually leave us in written and oral teachings? What is translated into English?
Nichiren Daishonin left us more than 470 gosho. That's a lot of gosho, isn't it? So these gosho are mostly in the form of letters to his followers concerning human problems. And those human problems, as you know, are just the same today as they were 700 years or so ago. Of those 470 or so letters and treaties, there are, I think I'm right in saying, the originals of about 100 and, the originals of about 170, I think. About 170 in their actual original form, and the balance copies of those letters that he'd written, where they started to disintegrate or whatever. So at some point, after Nichiren Daishonin died, there must have been a movement amongst all his followers to get together all the guidance he'd been given in letter form. And these were kept at the head temple at Taisekiji. So if you go to the head temple at Taisekiji, sometimes they have an exhibition of some of those original letters. And whatever happens once a year, they take them out of their caskets and boxes and what is called air them and inspect them to make sure that they're all still in good condition, and then they put them back again. This is an important ceremony which occurs every year at Taisekiji. And sometimes, if one happens to be in Japan at that time, you may be lucky enough to get an invitation to go to it. So, of all these dosho, there are still comparatively few have been translated into English. You could say, really, that the translations to date are in these 2 volumes of the dosho, plus another volume which will be out in the spring, I believe, of next year. Volume 3. So there have been translations of other gosho, many of them into English, but those have not been approved by the head temple. So these volumes are all approved by the high priest. All right? So that probably really answers that so far as written teachings. All teachings, there is only one important one, which is the Ongi Kuden, the oral teaching of Nichiren Daishonin, which was recorded by Nikko Shonin, who was his successor, as you know. Okay, so this is very unusual, really, in religion. Mostly religion has to rely on oral teachings, which are passed down from person to person, because in many cases, for one reason or another, they were never recorded in writing. As you know, in the case of Shakyamuni, they didn't begin to record his teachings until after he died in a series of councils. But in the case of Nichiren Daishonin, many of the gosho are extant, and others have been copied and written faithfully by people from the original document. Okay, that answers that question, all right. Right, thank you.
Next one is, who were Nichiren Daishonin's major disciples, and what have they left us?
I'm not quite sure what was behind that question. What have they left us? They've left us a great deal, because his major disciples were the people who received the gosho. People like Shijo Kingo, Nanjo Tokimitsu, and so on. And in those gosho, you can, of course, discover the life and spirit of those disciples through what Nichiren Daishonin is writing to them. So this is really what his disciples have left us, the gosho. If there'd been no disciples, there would have been no ghost show, obviously. So the major disciple, of course, was Nikko. Nikko Shonin, who was the second high priest of Nichiren Shoshu, and was his closest disciple. So Nikko Shonin joined Nichiren Daishonin when he was a very young fellow. And he was the only one who accompanied Nichiren Daishonin everywhere. When Nichiren Daishonin was first exiled to Izu, Nikko Shonin really had a battle to get himself to Izu in order to join his master. Likewise, Nikko Shonin went to Kado Island and shared the exile with Nichiren Daishonin. So he was the closest person to Nichiren Daishonin. He was the editor. So there were two transfer documents for transferring the Daigohonzan and the treasures and the teachings from Nichiren Daishonin to Nikko Shonin. These were inscribed or written by Nichiren Daishonin before he died. Okay? So there were also actually 5 other elder priests who Nichiren Daishonin appointed at various times to take various responsibilities. They were sort of senior leaders. But sadly, those priests failed in their responsibilities. And they are a classic lesson for us. The reason for their failure was that they totally lent on Nichiren Daishonin. Nikko Shonin never lent on his master. He absorbed everything that Nichiren Daishonin taught, and then he went out and did it himself. So often, Nikko Shonin would disappear for a day or two when he was with Nichiren Daishonin to do shakubuku. In the case of the other priests, the 5 elder priests, they sort of hero worshipped Nichiren Daishonin. They gave him protection. And when he died, they collapsed. That is to say, because of fear of persecution, they either went off and joined the sects that were not being persecuted. One or two tried to establish sects with teachings which were wishy-washy, mixing up Shaolin Buddhism with Nichiren Buddhism. So one way or another, they all failed. But Nikko Shonin was the person who, for time at Mount Manobu, eventually, because of the difficult situation that was arising there, persecution and attacks from others, and also because he desired to fulfill Nichiren Daishonin's will and testament, which was to establish the Daigohonzan in a beautiful place at the foot of Mount Fuji, which is where Nichiren Daishonin said it should be. He finally left Mount Manobu and, with all sorts of difficulties, traveled to the area of where Daiseki, the head temple, is now. Anjo Tokumitsu, the young lord who someone was talking about the other day, gave him some land in order to start to establish and found the head temple there. So the land on which the head temple stands is the land offered by Anjo Tokumitsu so long ago. Okay. Yes. The Onrikuden has not yet been translated officially into English. So, of course, it's available in Japanese. But you can be sure that these goshos are being translated in cooperation between the head temple and the Sokugakai in the rhythm, wisdom, the Ganzen. Therefore, the ones we receive, I'm quite sure they're the ones we need. And that will go on, of course, for many years yet. Always will be developing our understanding more and more. And those goshos, of course, are chosen through the power of the Gonzen, through people's daimoku. Yes, dear. Well, don't. I think it's a very difficult task. because sometimes I have to do it with Kazakh, and it takes a long time, and it has to be, really based on Dharmakara and faith. And it's a real struggle because you have to go on and on saying to yourself, have I got this exactly as Nichiren Daishonin would want it to be? So, of course, in the case of the English translations too, there is an expert in the English language in the form of Mr. Matsuda, who was the editor of the Seikyo Times for many years, who is brilliant in English. He, of course, is the main source of that assurance that the meaning and the nuances of meaning, as right as they can possibly be. So I think in any translation, you lose some of the beauty of the language. I believe the meaning is as sincerely stated as it's possible to be. Okay, it's a painstaking, very, very difficult task. And it's good sometimes to remember the incredible devotion and concentration of that team of people who spend their lives really translating for our benefit. Very difficult thing to do. Okay. Right. Next one. What of the various high priests left us? Robin China. Right. Okay. Robin, I'm not quite sure what you had in your mind when you said that. But the high priests, what they left us or given us is the Brahmanism. This is the most important point. If it hadn't been for the absolute devotion to Kosanufu of the high priests, we wouldn't have the Brahmanism today, would we? So this is the most important thing that they've handed down. So the ability and the right to inscribe a Brahmanism only lies with the high priest in direct succession from Nichiren Daishonin. So there is a saying that each high priest over the years has passed on what he's learned, originally by Mikko Shonin from Nichiren Daishonin, the next high priest, without spilling a drop of pure water. So each high priest is named his predecessor before the predecessor dies. You may say, well, how does he know he's going to die? That's a matter of wisdom. I don't know. Nobody else knows what the high priest does to prepare himself to inscribe the Brahmanisms. But my guess is it's quite a lengthy process and involves, of course, really elevating his Buddhist state so that it. That is, of course, we find our Brahmanisms work. That's the important point. So this is the task only of the high priests. So this is the greatest gift that all high priests have given us, especially on our broken line down through the centuries. One might say also on a broader scale than a personal one, that the high priest, in conducting Torabanya in the middle of the night for 700 years without ever a single break, was the roof of the world, giving us something there as well. But the most tangible thing is the Brahmanism. In addition to that, the high priests have, of course, made commentaries on the Gosho. Certain high priests are particularly important from that point of view, because it was their mission, in other words, to write commentaries that were really in the contemporary language of those times. So the 26th high priest, for example, is very famous, Nichiren Shonin, for that. But each high priest has his mission. A very particular aspect of Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism, which it's necessary for them to achieve in their lifetime, whatever the time and the circumstances need. You understand? Yes, Tony. Are different in the way the characters are inscribed because they're the personal characters of that particular high priest. So the Nichiren Shonin looks a little different from Nippatsu Shonin. But Nippatsu Shonin's gonzens look totally different from the gonzens by the previous 65th high priest. So probably some of you have seen those gonzens which have most of the characters rather out of the top, rather than spread very evenly. But of course, the important thing is the face of the high priest, which you can read that in script, and of course that all the characters are there.